Mark Kimmitt. He is the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State serving under President George W. Bush. And from Washington, Barry Pavel, who's an international security analyst at the Atlantic Council. There he is. Hi to both of you, and thanks so much for being with us. Mark, let me start with you. You know, the U.S. has always had good relations with Saudi Arabia, not so much because of similar ideology, but obviously because of financial interest. But do you think that relationship, has become a greater PR liability in the last 3 years, especially after, the Jamal Khashoggi murder got so much publicity and really fell, even without saying, on the head of MBS?
Well, I think the relationship between two countries should not be based on public relations, but in terms of joint and mutual interests. That may be where the relationship has slipped a bit because our dependency on Saudi oil is not where it was, say, 20 years ago. But we do have a strong relationship on defense matters and on diplomatic matters, given the importance of Saudi Arabia to the region. And candidly, if this president can get Saudi Arabia to join in on the Abraham Accords to recognize Israel, that relationship will become even stronger.
Okay, so that is if the Trump presidency continues as it is. That would most certainly be in the cards. If it doesn't, what happens?
Well, I think there might be a little bit of strain initially between a Biden administration and Saudi Arabia, because as it was under President Obama, there was tension because the Americans were seen as leaning more towards Iran than to the Arab world. And it could well be, and is expected to be, that if a President Biden takes office, he will first want to restart the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which again will be seen by the Arab world as leaning towards Iran and away from the Arab world in that relationship which has been built back by President Trump. But
when you say the Arab world, you mean the Gulf states?
Primarily.
You're right.
Primarily,
because
right.
Palestinians wouldn't say the same, and there are obviously others in the Arab world.
Well, Palestinians would not say that they were Arabs either.
Okay. Let me turn to Barry quickly. Barry, I want to get you in on this. Mark doesn't think the PR, I'm hopefully using the correct term, I don't know if you think, but the liability that I was kind of citing over the last 3 years of having Saudi be such a strong ally and wanting to work so closely with a regime that so many have now thrown into question. I cited the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Do you think that's meant anything? Has it stained Trump at all, or no? Has the Saudi relationship with the U.S. just been the same as ever and will continue as such?
I think I agree with Mark, where it's a question of interests, and the United States shares many interests with Saudi Arabia, in particular in the region, countering Iran's many hostile and aggressive activities, terrorism, their nuclear program, a wide range of other measures that they take that supports instability, including reportedly interfering in the U.S. election, meddling in the U.S. election, and launching other cyber attacks. So I think any U.S. administration would want to have close ties between the United States and Saudi Arabia. I do agree with Mark too that a Trump reelected would be certainly initially closer to the Saudis than would Biden, who has had in general frostier relations back in the Obama administration. The interesting question that's unknowable is would a Biden, if he were elected, would he not necessarily hew to the exact same policies as the Obama administration? I agree with Mark, the JCPOA will be first and foremost, but does that mean that a President Biden would not also perhaps pursue additional constraints on Iran, constraints on Iran's ballistic missile programs, for example, constraints on Iran's destabilizing activity as additional measures that it might seek to negotiate? We don't know that yet, but that is something that is possible.
Okay. Mark, let me ask you, Trump has had, as we know, a particularly antagonistic relationship with Iran that yep. You essentially agree with. But I have to ask about the election. What do American voters actually think? As an American voter yourself, are they taking this into consideration as they go to the polls?
No, Americans don't look beyond the water when it comes to elections. They're focused on domestic issues, law and order issues, pocketbook issues. And for somebody working in Topeka, Kansas, they probably couldn't find either Iraq or Iran on a map. That's not meant to be insulting,
Right.
but I think it's just a matter
It's
of
the
recognizing that foreign policy doesn't play in an election.
Now, I agree with you there, but I mean, over the course of the last 4 years, there were points when even the American, domestic media was actually talking about the possibility of going to war with Iran because of that antagonism. Did it play at home at all?
Oh, certainly. When you start talking about Americans sending their sons and daughters to foreign countries, potentially to fight wars, then it picks up amplitude inside the United States. But that's not what's happening now. In fact, foreign policy isn't even mentioned, it was not even mentioned in the debates, and I don't think it's going to matter when they go to the polling booths.
Okay. On another front then, Trump promised with his son-in-law in the lead to bring peace to the Middle East, or at least peace between Israel and Palestine. Do you think we're closer to that because of Trump's deal of the century? And again, I mean, how are voters factoring that in?
Well, I would say it's not the deal of the century yet. It's not the deal of the decade. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Depending on how you view the issue, there have been changes that have been substantial. The movement of the American embassy to Tel Aviv, the Abraham Accords. Now, where you stand on the issue says whether those are good things or bad things. There has been change in the peace process. Whether it's going to lead to more peace or not is yet to be seen.
Okay. Mark, thank you so much for being with us. Barry Pavel, we will actually see you later in the program, but we'll leave it there for now. Thanks both so much.